Decisions, decisions. Yeah, today's video is going to be all about making decisions, and in particular, in my case, the top 10 of my most anticipated fantasy and science fiction series that I haven't even started yet. You guys, I'm really excited to make this video. In fact, my friend Theo over at Rekindled Reader was really the inspiration for this. Of course, Mike, in many videos over at Mike's Book Reviews, has done something similar over the years. So I thought I would take my crack at it. But you know, before we get into that, there is something extremely important. Well, you could say it's almost vital that we do, just to draw you into the energy. Let's do it. Hey, welcome back to BellTube, everybody. If you're brand new here, my name's Brian Bell, and again, this channel is called BellTube, where we focus a lot about fantasy and science fiction and lit RPG here on the channel. Now, as I mentioned at the outstart, I got this idea from my friend Theo over at Rekindled Reader, and I really wanted to do it in a way that is kind of unique to BellTube, in a way that's unique to what we do over here. And insofar as thinking about that, I really wanted to make this video about decisions. And we're going to get to that at the very end of the episode in a section that we do on every video here called One for the Road. So if you're new to the channel and you have no idea what One for the Road is, stick around and find out. I generally get more comments about what I'm saying on the One for the Road than any particular book. So I hope you find some value there. Of course, like all of the videos here, everything is time-stamped. So if I start talking about a book or a series that you're just not that into, feel free to move on to the next chapter. All right, so we are talking about the top 10 of my most anticipated series that I'm excited to get into, both at the end of this year and starting in 2025. All right, so there's a couple of caveats here that I want to share. One, you're not going to hear the Hyperion Cantos or Dune on this list. Why? Because I've already started them. This is an entirely fresh list. So you're also not going to hear anything about R. Scott Baker's Second Apocalypse series. Why? Because I'm 3.5 books into Malazan Book of the Fallen, and from what I understand, reading both of those simultaneously can get a little difficult. And for the most part, a lot of these series that I'm going to share with you today, I feel like I can probably read them along with my Malazan read-through. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. The first series that I am starting off in January of 2025, we have been calling January. Why? Because myself and John over at the Talking Story channel have decided to do a readathon of the series The Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts. Here's book 1. Curse of the Mistwraith. Now, I am very fired up to read this book. I'm very fired up for the series for a couple of reasons. One, I read her standalone book, To Ride Hell's Chasm, back in, I want to say, April, and it was a 5-star book for me, and I don't give out a lot of 5 stars. So that alone piqued my interest for this series. But you know, when you do a kind of like a read-along or a buddy read or a group read, as we're going to do with The Wars of Light and Shadow, it's even a little bit more fun because you have somebody to talk to about it. So if you are thinking about The Wars of Light and Shadow, you've still got time, right? As I'm filming this, it's only in mid-September. We're not starting this till the beginning of January. You've got time. The Wars of Light and Shadow, Book 1, Curse of the Mistwraith by Janny Wurts. That's number 1 on my most anticipated list. Now, moving on to the second series that I'm super excited about, I have to be honest, I'm shocked I haven't read it already, or at least read the 2 books that are published. I am talking about John Gwynne's The Shadow of the Gods is the book, and of course, the series is the Bloodsworn Saga. Now, I know one of our patrons, Heidi, has been pushing me to read this book for months. Dr. Philip Chase has been pushing me to read this series for months as well, so this is a real high priority. In fact, I'm going to say the first series that we mentioned, Wars of Light and Shadow, and the Bloodsworn Saga are my two highest priorities on this list, because this list, for the most part, after these two, are really in any order that I feel like at the time, whatever I decide on. And we're going to talk about decisions on the one for the road. But yeah, I really loved The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. I have no reason to think that I'm not going to love this book and this series as well. From what I understand, it's very focused on Norse mythology, and that is right up my alley here in Minnesota. Let's move on to the next series. All right, the next series up on the list. This series has been suggested to me so many times. In fact, one of our viewers who happens to have her own YouTube channel called She Was Only Evie herself sent me the entire 4-book set. I am talking about the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. Book 1 is The Grace of Kings. I don't know what this is about at all. I suspect it's, Asian influenced. I think that's the general setting, but I don't know anything about it. So you're asking, so why is this so high up on your anticipated, series list? It's because of the hype. I have so many friends that I respect deeply that just love the Dandelion Dynasty. So it has to be somewhere on this list. And like I said, after those first two series, these aren't in any particular order, and I'm not sure where the Dandelion Dynasty will fall in, but it definitely makes that top 10 anticipated series list. So before we get into the rest of the list, if you find yourself liking BookTube, if you've never been to this channel before, think about hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. The reason why I ask is because it exposes the channel to more people that can then find out about some fantasy and sci-fi books that they might be unaware of, or to find out what I think about their favorite books. It's a lot of fun. Come join our community. I'm not going to go on and on about subscribing and liking. You already know what to do. Let's move on to the 4th series. All right, this 4th series, again, I'm excited about all these, so I think that that's going to be a running theme, how excited I am. Now, the author himself sent me all of the books that are currently published, so I have to send a big shout out to P.L. Stuart for sending me his Drowned Kingdom Saga book, and as a matter of fact, book 1's called A Drowned Kingdom. Now, this is an Atlantean adventure, I believe. I really don't know a whole lot about it, but I have had the opportunity to talk to P.L. Stuart a couple of times. The guy is just a cool dude. I want to read his books. And for the people that I know that have already read it, all the way up to somebody like author Janny Wurts, who I respect immensely, kind of at the top of the mountain of my respect level, she's gone on and on about P.L. Stuart's writing as well. So where this is going to fall in, I'm not exactly sure, but it is a high priority series for 2025. Okay, so this next series was really making its rounds earlier this year on BookTube, and in some regard last year as well. A viewer of the channel named Steven didn't just send me this book, he sent me the entire trilogy, and I know enough booktuber friends that are so high on this, and they say it reminds them a bit of Joe Abercrombie. I am talking about the Last War series by Mike Shackle, and book 1 is We Are the Dead. I have the whole trilogy. Steven sent it to me. There's no real reason that I can't get to these books in 2025. I will say that the series that are trilogies on this list have a much, much higher chance of becoming more of the immediate series that I'm trying to get to, just because I like to be a completionist. And if I know that a series is really only a trilogy, I'm probably more likely to rock that out than something that's going to be 10, 11, 12 books, excepting, of course, The Wars of Light and Shadow, which is 11 books, and that's at the top of the list, as I mentioned before. All right, so We Are the Dead, Mike Shackle. You're coming up in 2025. I don't know what month yet, but it is a high priority. Let's move on to the next series. All right, this next series, book 1 was sent to me by a viewer. And again, I got to thank all you viewers who send in book mail. It's definitely never expected, but certainly always appreciated. Now, this book has been called, I'm going to read it on the cover, one of my favorite books of all time by author Mark Lawrence. I am talking about Josiah Bancroft's series, the Babel series, and book 1 is Senlin Ascends. I don't know anything about this at all. I know a ton of my friends have read this series. Some of them have liked it more than others. I want to say, I think Alan from Library of Alexandria really enjoyed this. but I'm not sure with Alan. You never know. I have to go back and watch one of his videos. But yeah, the Books of Babel, I think is what this series is called. It's a priority list for me insofar as, for one, somebody sent me the book, which is just incredibly cool, and I don't want to shelve it overly long since they went out of their way to do that. But also, I know a lot of my friends have read this over the last year or so, and I want to find out what the hype's about. So, Sunlit Ascends is a priority series, The Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft. Let's move on to the next one. All right, I'm a little bit ashamed of this one. So we all have blind spots in our reading when it comes to particular authors. And I cannot believe I have never read any Tad Williams. Here I am with this BookTube channel. I've read, I don't know, thousands of fantasy sci-fi books. I've never read a single Tad Williams book. Well, here comes the Broken Binding, right? So they are a subscription service that created their own editions of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn books. I'm going to show a graphic here of how cool this artwork is for the first book, The Dragonstone Chair. It's an absolute priority series for me. Why? Because I haven't read any Tad Williams, and I want to do that before I get into that second set that I know, like my friend Jimmy Nuts is reading right now. I think it's called, you know what? I don't even remember. I'm not even going to guess. Anyway, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Everybody's asking me to read it, so I need to get to it. Yeah, it's a little intimidating by the time you get to the third book, because from what it looks like, just by the page count, the word count, it looks like To Green Angel Tower, which I think is the final book in the trilogy, is really about the size of 2 books. So again, it's 4 books versus 3 books. Not a huge deal. It's certainly not 14 books. Looking at you, Wheel of Time. Anyway, that's on the priority list. Let's move on to the next one. I should also probably say that there's a lot of series out there that I've already read, right? So if we're talking about Realm of the Elderlings, Dark Tower, Wheel of Time, they're all in this video that I did called my top 10 fantasy series of all time. I did that right around the end of last year. So I'm going to throw a card up right here if you want to find out about what I think of some fantasy series and some sci-fi series that maybe aren't on this list. The reason why is because I've read them already. All right, let's move on to the next one. Now, this next series is more on the harder sci-fi avenue, and this is Ian M. Banks' Culture series, and book 1 is called Consider Phlebas. I don't know anything about this. The only thing that I know is that I think I've heard that these books can be read as standalones, but they do all have a line connecting them all. There'd be no real reason that I'm going to go out and get book 2 or book 3 before reading book 1, even though almost everybody that I've watched on BookTube has universally said that books 2 and books 3 are better than the first book. Again, blind spot in my reading. I've never read any Ian M. Banks. I really ought to get to that. So if you've probably noticed, everything up until this point on this list has been fantasy. So let's get some sci-fi in here, right? We had a spaceship in the opening intro. We got to get some sci-fi. All right, the Culture series. It's priority series for 2025. Let's keep moving. So I don't know if I'm going to get to it next year or if it's going to be in 2026. And I'm going to look at my notes here because I think that this is a little bit tricky to say. Actually, it's not. It's the Vorkosigan Saga by Lois McMaster Bujold. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I think it's French. If I got that right, let me know in the comments that I named her right, and we will give props to my 8th grade French teacher, because that's all the French I took was 1 year in 8th grade. Book 1 is called Shards of Honor. I believe these came out, I want to say in the 80s or maybe 90s. I'm not exactly sure. But this author has been very universally acclaimed by people that I really respect that read quite a bit of science fiction. So the Vorkosigan Saga, I don't know what it's about. Leave a comment. Let me know. For those of you who know my taste, leave a comment. Let me know if you think I'm going to like this series. Let's move on to the next one. The next series on this list, I've had it up in a couple of community polls, and it's done pretty well. It's a litrpg, I believe, progression fantasy series. This is by Drew Hayes, and book 1 is Superpowerds Year 1. All I know is I've had a ton of people in the comments over the last few months suggest to me, Brian, you are so into the litrpg genre. How have you not read this series yet? I don't know, you guys. When I'm reading 13 or 14 book series in litrpg, sometimes things slip through. All right, I'm making it a priority. It's made this list, so that means I'm getting to it. I'm going to try to do it right in the first quarter of 2025. I see no real reason to delay this further. Drew Hayes, let's do this. I am ready to find out about all the hype. What's this hype for about the Superpowerds? We're going to find out. Before we do a one for the road today, I want to say a special thank you to the people that are patrons of this channel. We have a very intimate Patreon. I'm going to throw a little card up right here, and you can see some of the names of the people in our Patreon. I'd love you to join. The price is so cheap. It's literally less than $2 a month. If you want to support the channel in kind of a meaningful way for me, helps me grow my own gear and do a bunch of cool ideas that I have, consider subscribing to the Patreon. I would love that. Let's do a one for the road. If you're brand new here, at the end of every episode of BellTube, really doesn't matter what I'm talking about for the main topic, I do a segment called One for the Road. And that allows me to just kind of share some thoughts with you guys as the viewers. Basically some strategies and some tips and some tricks and some food for thought of experiences that I've had in life that I hope, certainly my 15 years of owning a nightclub and my entire life of reading might be beneficial to you. Now, obviously, some topics are going to be more useful and interesting to you than others, but I think today's one for the road is probably applicable to most of us, and that is about decisions and decision making. And that's why I put on the thumbnail itself, decisions, decisions. A lot of us are really self-described bad decision makers. And I think a lot of us get into kind of this paralysis by analysis mentality where we just have a hard time with it. A lot of people will say, I don't know, you choose. I am terrible at making decisions. I am here to tell you that I know this from my own life experience to be truth. Decision making is a skill that you can learn, and you can learn it mostly by just doing it, just exercising your ability to make a decision. Again, paralysis by analysis can really happen to anybody, particularly if some of the decisions that you have, in your life are pretty big, right? They're certainly bigger than which book series that I'm going to read next. But you know what? Everybody has to have a starting place. So my challenge for all of us today is to start using that muscle in our brains that really informs how we go about making decisions. And we're going to do this simply by making some decisions. Let's pick some things in our life that aren't super important. They're not life or death matters. But it might be, should I read this book or should I read that book? Should I do this series? Should I do that series? And let's just make a choice, right? Stop thinking about all the pros and cons. Forget about writing down a list of every reason to do it and every reason not to do it and adding it up and coming up to something and then second guessing it and blah, blah, blah. Forget it. The best way you can get better at making decisions is simply to start making them and make them quickly. The worst case is if you start off with some relatively unimportant life decisions, the worst case is maybe you'll say, you know what? I should have gone the other way. Instead of going left, I should have gone right. Instead of reading this series, I should have read that series. Fine. The most important part in all of this is that you actually made a decision. You didn't hem and haw. In making that decision, you strengthen your ability to make your next decision. And this is something that I know is going to be useful in your life, as it has been in mine. Get used to making decisions because it is extraordinarily empowering to feel like you are somebody that is capable and competent at making decisions and making them relatively quickly. Of course, the more complicated the situation is, the more advanced and the more kind of, as you look out and your gaze into the future, how life-changing it might be, then sure, you might want to take a little bit more time. So certainly some decisions are certainly more long-term life impacting than others. Where you're going to go to college, if that's something that you want to do, or whether you even want to go to college, whether you're going to have this career path or that career path, then yes, of course, certainly taking your time to make an informed decision is valid and it's useful. But I am talking about folks that just can't decide. Do I want Italian food tonight or do I want Chinese food? I don't know. I really like chicken parmesan, but then again, I also really like chow mein. And you just, it doesn't work. pick something and move on. It will strengthen your inner ability to make easy decisions, and the better you are at making easy decisions, the better you're going to be at making medium ones and then bigger ones. And I think that is extremely valuable. I would like to know in the comment section below a couple of things. One, of all these series that I've shared with you here today, apart from the first two, which are locked in stone, right? Wars of Light and Shadow and the Bloodsworn Saga. Those are locked in. Apart from those, which of the other 8 do you really want to see me get to first? I'd also like to know if you've been hemming and hawing on some series and you can't decide, throw them in the comments, because you know what? I'm going to meet you in the comments and I'm going to help you decide. And so will all the other members of the BellTube community. We act as a community here. I think we're going to have a blast with this one in the comment section. I'll see you there. Stay positive, everybody. And of course, here's your fortune.